You are listening to the Life Coach Business Podcast with Amanda Karlstad, episode number 213. Welcome to the Life Coach Business Podcast, a show for coaches who are ready to up-level their business and take their impact, leadership, and results to a whole new level. If you're ready to start taking powerful action and become the leader your business needs in order to grow and thrive, this show is for you. I'm your host, Amanda Karlstad, certified life and business coach and entrepreneurial leadership expert. Now let's get down to business. All right, everybody, I have a really special guest today that I'm so excited to bring to you and to have this conversation. I have on the show today, Autumn Witt Boyd, who is an experienced and relatable lawyer who helps million-dollar coaches and online educators reach their big goals. Together with her team at the AWB firm, Autumn guides online businesses as they grow. She has special expertise in copyright and trademark issues, and her firm offers full-service legal support. And I will say I have been working with Autumn and her team over the course of the last few years, and they are such a wonderful team, have been such a great resource for me. I've referred so many clients to the AWB firm, and I highly recommend Autumn and her team's work. So with that, welcome to the show, Autumn.
Thank you, Amanda. That was such a delightful intro. And full disclaimer, you're not an affiliate or anything. There's no compensation being traded.
No, but I do want to let
really
everybody know that
your feedback.
No, you're so welcome. And one of the things that I want to also say to you, Autumn, is that what I appreciate so much about you and your team is that you do understand the online coaching industry specifically. I think there's a lot of course, attorneys out there. There's a lot of resources that we have the option to use. And what I really appreciate so much about your team is that you're so knowledgeable about the online coaching industry specifically. And you have so much experience working in that field. So thank you so much for taking the time today. I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, same here.
All right. Okay. Well, let's just dive in. I think a really good starting point for us, Autumn, is let's just talk a little bit about the different stages of business and from your vantage point, specifically the legal considerations that coaches really need to be thinking about in those different phases. And before we hit record, you and I were talking a little bit about the listeners here, and being that we have listeners that are earlier stage in their business, we have listeners all the way, in the 7+ figures that are listening to this show. And so I think there's different considerations at different levels in the business. And so I'd love to just kind of pass that over to you and talk a little bit about what you think are some of those most important things for coaches to be thinking about in those different stages.
Absolutely. So I will plug a resource. I'm going to do kind of a high level discussion with you, Amanda, but if anyone identifies a phase that you want to know more of, if you're like, oh, I'm in this phase, I'd like to get more specifics. I did a whole series on my podcast, the Legal Roadmap podcast.
Right.
So if you want to go search that up in any podcast player, you can look for the episodes. It was 120 through 125, but the numbers don't show up. So it's like launch phase, solopreneur phase. Just look for those titles and you'll find those episodes. Yeah. But so I will just give my standard disclaimer, which is this is not legal advice. Amanda is a client, but no one else listening is likely.
Yeah.
So I'm a lawyer. I'm licensed in Tennessee. Our firm practices primarily in the United States. So everything I'm going to be talking about is based on U.S. law. I will just kind of share my philosophy and our firm's philosophy when it comes to what legal protections you need at different times, because every lawyer may have a different take on this. But this is how we approach it. And especially with online businesses, we look at what are the risks. So kind of what could go wrong. And then we try and put legal protections in proportion to those risks. So the good news is when you are just starting, when you're launching, when you're in those early phases, when you're trying to figure out what you want to do, who you want to work with, you're probably throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall, which is exactly what you should be doing. You're testing and changing a lot. The good news is most of those newer businesses, it's very low risk. Because you don't have a lot of capital invested in a coaching business. Usually, maybe you've done some training, but that's kind of your own education. It's not like you bought a building and have it full of restaurant equipment or something. It's a pretty low investment typically up front. And the things that can go wrong are, usually just maybe you have an unhappy client. Like there just aren't that many, someone's not going to fall and break their leg coming to your office. You're not going to light a building on fire. Like That's great news for coaches who are listening. And I know there can be a lot of fear, and that's totally normal. You just worry about the things that you don't know that could possibly go wrong. But I will tell you from our experience, we've worked with hundreds of coaches, course creators, and other online businesses, is that those early phases are low risk. And so that's a great time for you to experiment. And I would just give everyone permission to kind of take a deep breath and not worry so much about getting all the legal stuff wrong in those first days, because we get a lot of inquiries with just fear and worry and concerns.
Yeah.
And so I just don't want that to stop people from getting started and, starting to make some money and help some people, which is what coaching is all about.
Absolutely. I love that advice because I agree. I think there's so many decisions that you have to make, especially, as you're starting out and as you continue to grow and scale. And I do think one of those considerations I see a lot with my clients who are in the earlier stages is, what do I even need? Where do I even start with this?
Yeah.
So again, considering this is not legal advice, but what are some of those like must-haves, do you think, at that time?
Yeah. So the couple of things I would recommend is think about your personal risk. So let's say maybe you are a licensed professional. We work with a lot of doctors and nurses turned coaches. So that may raise your risk a little bit, especially if you're wanting to do kind of a hybrid where you help people. Maybe you're prescribing a weight loss drug and you're helping with weight loss coaching. Like that is just a little bit of a different evaluation. So if you do have a little bit of a higher risk profile, you may want to look at going ahead and setting up a legal entity, either an LLC or corporation, sooner rather than later. The other consideration there is if you have significant personal assets. So let's say maybe you were a high earner in your previous job, or you have family wealth, or your partner does. Again, that's a different risk profile. We want to make sure we protect that. And when you form an LLC or corporation, you're kind of putting a fence around your personal assets so that if something goes wrong in the business, they can't come at your personal money, your personal belongings. So think about that. That may be a yes or a no. And I do find a lot of folks want to do this right away, set up an LLC or corporation. There is a cost involved, and there's a cost every single year, and you'll have to start paying some taxes and things. So I would say if your risk is low, I wouldn't worry about it right away. That may be, after you've kind of proof of concept, after you've had a few clients, things are working, you're sure that you're going to keep doing it. I might think about that. Yeah.
Okay.
But the big thing that I would recommend that everyone, and to do this pretty early, is to make sure that however you're planning on making money, so whether that's one-on-one coaching, if you're going to do a group program, or if you have an online course, to make sure that you have some sort of agreement with your customers, some sort of contract or terms of use that is protecting your intellectual property, so you can tell people what they can and can't do with it.
Yes.
It will have things like what I'm sure we'll talk about more, a refund policy, how you can terminate the relationship if you need to, just kind of all that good stuff. That is where we see the most problems come up in the early phases, is with your clients or customers. And if you don't have an agreement, it's really tricky to navigate that.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's go into intellectual property. So this is a conversation that you and I briefly had. We were at an event about a month ago and we're having a conversation around this. And I want to dive in because partly selfishly, but also because I think this is a really important conversation and I really value your perspective. And I think your perspective is actually very different, I think, for the majority of coaches. And so that is around intellectual property and people essentially, or clients essentially coming in and taking your intellectual property or repurposing that or, copying it essentially. So let's talk about that.
Okay. Yeah, I do have kind of an unpopular opinion in this space. Okay. So I'll get on my soapbox a little bit. The thing that no one wants to hear, but that I say often, is that if you're doing something awesome, if you're doing good work, if your clients are getting results, you will be copied. Like, just go ahead and know that that is part of business.
Yeah.
And it still sucks. Like, it's not fun. I have been copied. Like, nobody likes it.
Too.
Yeah. But it is just kind of the name of the game. And especially with coaching, we do put out so much content. A lot of us do content marketing. We're on social media. We're doing blogs and emails. Like, we're putting a lot out that is not behind a paywall. And that's still your intellectual property. But because it is so public, it makes it really easy for copycats to take it.
Right.
So I don't know that will give anyone any comfort, but that kind of leads into the next thing that I want to say, which is I always want folks to protect their intellectual property.
Okay.
But what I find is copycats rarely are actually affecting your business. So they're not usually. Now, sometimes this is different and we might take a different approach, but let's say you have a program name that you think is really catchy and someone starts a program with a similar name. I don't find that people are losing clients because of that. It feels bad. It feels terrible. But people are often, especially as you're building your brand, folks are often hiring a coach because they know, like, and trust the coach. They've either had some interaction with them, they've seen them on social media, they have watched their videos, they've listened to their podcast. It's very personal. And so while trademarks are important and they become more important the more you scale, they are not that important for a while. So there's some kind of basic protections we can do, but I find this rush to like rush out and register the trademarks to everything you can imagine in your business is sometimes just kind of a waste of time and energy and money.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate that distinction, Autumn, because this is something that I think is different when I look at the clients that I work with, again, that are maybe in the earlier stages of business versus the clients that I'm working with where we're scaling, we're at that 7+ figure mark, or we're scaling to that 7 figures. And as I shared with you before we started hitting record, I actually advised a couple of clients just last week to go out and trademark essentially their names, which is their program names, because they're so good. And as we are now stepping into this scale phase, which we already, are seeing a lot of traction, I know just from experience, and I've advised other clients that are further along in the journey. And I do think that it does become important, especially if it's a very niche topic. I have found with several of my clients who are very specific in their niche, that is something very new. It's something very unique. It's a different take on their work and on the problem that they're solving. Once that starts to catch, especially we start layering on like paid advertising and we really start to build, a lot of volume, what I tend to see is that those things do get picked up by others in the industry. And we have had a couple of instances where it was good that they had gone out and they had taken the advice and actually trademarked their intellectual property, because we did run into that. So I do think I really appreciate that distinction. And I would agree with that. I do think early on, I don't think it's as important. And I would agree. I don't think that it's even a conversation about we're losing business, but where I do see it come into play is when you're starting to get, or you're at kind of that $1 million mark and beyond, where you just have much more visibility. You have much more volume in terms of eyeballs, essentially, right, on your brand, that I do think that that's an important move. So I actually agree with you. I think that that's a really important distinction. That's
and I'll share one reason why we take this approach at our firm is trademark law is really meant to protect consumers and to help them find the thing they're looking for. So think about if you're in Walmart and you're trying to find a Coke, how do you know you're getting Coke and not Pepsi? It's the label, it's the logo, it's the shape of the bottle, it's all those things.
Got it.
So what registering your trademark does, going through that whole process, paying all the money with the USPTO, is it gives you the ability to protect your rights more easily. So if you see someone with the same program, you can send a letter not only to them, cease and desist, but if their course is on Kajabi, you can send it to Kajabi and say, hey, you've got infringing content on your platform.
Yeah.
And if you've got a registration, that process is a lot easier. And it will show the other person, hey, they've put their money where their mouth is. They are taking their brand seriously. It might make the other person kind of more willing to play ball. So like you said, that does become more important as your business grows, but it's kind of the first piece of a strategy that requires more time, more energy, more legal fees. So you need to be in a place in your business where that makes sense, kind of proportionally. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. Great. What about one of the things that as we were sharing that popped into my mind was, and we haven't talked about this, but the conversation around AI.
I made a face. It's a big one.
I feel like it. Yeah. And I don't even know, quite honestly, like from a legal standpoint, where do you start? Or what are the considerations? I would love your perspective on that.
Yeah, it is the wild, wild west. It is still, and I'm going to mention, we're recording this November 1st, 2023, because things are changing very rapidly. So I have like my copyright lawyer nerd hat that I can get on, but I don't think that's super helpful to your audience.
Okay.
What I will say is it is a tool. It is not directly copying anybody else's stuff. So I think there's a lot of worry about, plagiarism, which there should be. You should not be copying other people's stuff.
Yeah.
But the way that these chat GPT and these engines work is they're kind of amalgamating millions and millions of pieces of content and kind of using this algorithm to spit out something new. So we use it at our firm. I find it incredibly valuable for kind of getting past that, crappy first draft. Nobody likes the blank page. We've been using it to repurpose content. And so I like to give it some options. I think, Corinne Crabtree, who's a friend and client, she's always joking like ChatGPT never has a bad day. It always has a good attitude. Like you can ask it for 30 headlines and it will spit out 30 headlines. So I think it's great to iterate on things, to come up with ideas. And I don't see a lot of intellectual property concerns, at least right now, because of the way it works. Again, this may change. The people whose work was fed into it to create this algorithm are not happy, but that's kind of a separate issue. But I would say take what it comes out. I mean, if you're posting or, sharing that first draft that it comes out with, it's usually not great. So it typically needs some tweaks, but I have found it really helpful. So I am a fan. Yeah. Okay. I know other people have kind of ethical issues or just don't feel like it may put writers out of work. I know there's lots of side roads we could go down, but
there are. I mean, there's so many different ways. And I know from my vantage point, I have considered, not that I'm, living in fear around it, but you touched on it. One of the things that I have thought about, as a content creator, as, a podcaster, as, all the work that I do is, the risk of that being used and repurposed again, like just available for anybody to kind of take and use. And I think what you said is, it's an amalgamation and, we're still kind of early on. It could change, but that thought has crossed my mind, if I'm being honest. Just as what do we do with that, right? As my own intellectual property, as I sit down and record these podcasts every week and, create the content that I create, that is a bit of a concern that I do have moving forward.
Well, and the thing that just kind of creeps me out, honestly, is that it is so good that I can put in, we work with Amy Porterfield and her voice is not exactly our voice, but it's not that different. And you can write an email in the voice of Amy Porterfield and you can give it some bullet points. And man, if you didn't know better, you would think that was Amy Porterfield talking. So I worry a little bit about the kind of deceptive potential use, impersonation, basically. But we're going to be seeing a lot of changes on this. Stay tuned on this topic.
I'm sure you're going to be busy. You'll be very busy.
We'll see.
Okay. All right. So one of the things that I think comes up a lot in the coaching for coaches specifically that I want to talk through that I think is a valuable conversation is the conversation around guarantees. And I think as, books like $100 Million Offers was released, I think it was maybe a year and a half ago, Alex Hormozy's book, as, different teachings have kind of come into this industry, I think we're seeing more and more, especially from advertisers that talk about the importance of, giving guarantees and that sort of thing. And so again, this is a big conversation, but I think, and I have my own viewpoints on this, which I'm happy to share, but I would love for us to dive into the conversation around offering guarantees for clients. And I do realize this isn't relevant for every niche. It's not relevant. I don't think it makes sense for every audience, but I do have clients and, a lot of coaches I think do fall into a category where, and maybe thinking right now, listening to this, what do I do? Do I offer a guarantee? Do I not? What do I do? What are the legal considerations that I need to have here?
Yeah, absolutely. When I think of guarantees, I think of them as a sales tool. And I think people don't talk about that enough, but you are lowering the risk for your customer. You are telling them, buy this thing. It's not very risky because if you don't get the results or if you don't get whatever I'm guaranteeing, I'll give you your money back or you can, whatever the and or part of the guarantee is. So when you look at it that way, not everyone needs to offer a guarantee because some people, have really proven results and a great reputation and people are happy to buy from them. So that's just something to think about because if you are offering a guarantee legally, that does open the door to new rules and regulations. And this is another area I think not enough people are talking about, but there are actually Federal Trade Commission rules. If you use the word guarantee, especially money back guarantee in your advertising, there are rules that you are supposed to be complying with. And this varies a little bit depending on exactly the language you're using. So I can't give a black and white rule, but it's basically, if you are guaranteeing something, you have to put your money where your mouth is. Like if you are going to have 12 conditions around a money back guarantee, like you only get your money back if you do this, then that should be on your sales page. Like you can't just say money back guarantee and then it's kind of hidden in the fine print. Okay. Like if you are offering a guarantee, you need to be pretty upfront. Federal Trade Commission's job is to protect consumers, and, truth in advertising is their big thing. So they don't like things to be hidden.
Got it.
So just be aware if you are offering any kind of guarantee or warrant in the coaching space, we're not really using warranties. That's more with products, but you are going to have more compliance, and you should probably either be doing some research on your own, or if your company is at a place where it makes sense, certainly at 7 figures or beyond, you should be consulting with legal counsel to make sure that you're not opening yourself up to problems there.
Yeah, that's great. So do you think some of those big issues that businesses at that 7-figure level or, are on their way or nearing, kind of nearing that $1 million mark? What are those big considerations for those businesses?
Yeah, we talked about before we hit record a little bit. What I'm seeing with our larger clients is a lot of refund requests. And I don't know if it's the economy. I don't know if it's just like we're past 2020 and people are kind of wisening up. And so if they feel like they're not getting their money's worth, they are not hesitant to ask for a refund. So when I see that is like an end problem. And I like to back up and say like, okay, what are the things we could have done to prevent that? So I will share a couple of those, what we like to do proactively. And some of this is just business advice. It's not really legal, but make sure your sales page and your emails and your webinar really matches what you're delivering. Like the biggest problems that I see is either circumstances changed and you couldn't fulfill a requirement, or, maybe you forgot that you promised something. These programs sometimes can be 6 months or a year. So just making sure you're really delivering on your promises is kind of number one. Number two, making sure that your contract is really solid around refunds. We always ask new clients, what is your refund policy? And often people say, well, I don't have a policy. I don't give refunds. And that is a policy.
Yeah.
So you need to be stating that in a really clear way all throughout your sales process, and especially in the contract. That should not be a surprise to someone if they are unhappy with your program. And then they're like, oh, no refunds. I had no idea. And then it really becomes a customer service issue at that point. And I think the other lesson we've learned that just as a lawyer, I think like almost everything is negotiable, but I know normal people don't necessarily think that way. Often when someone is unhappy, they're usually unhappy with like one little part of a program or one little thing that didn't get delivered or didn't go as they expected. But they want a full refund. Almost always. This is what we see. Like, I paid you $20,000. You didn't give me this one thing. I want all my money back. And what we have found is you can negotiate that. You can say, I understand you weren't happy with XYZ. Like, we will give you a partial refund, or we will extend we'll give you some extra coaching, or there may be other ways that you can resolve that conflict other than just a full refund.
Right. Yeah, no, that's wonderful advice. And I do think what you said about making sure that that's very clear in the contracts, I think is a great, no matter where you're at, what stage you're at in the business, I think is a great thing to look at for anybody that's listening, what that looks like right now in your business. And if it's non-existent, I mean, that's definitely something I would also recommend to look at right away. I appreciate your vantage point on that, because I agree. I think a lot of times, as a coach, we want the best. We pour ourselves into our work, and, inevitably there may be somebody that comes through the program that isn't happy. And I agree with what you said. A lot of times it could be just maybe that one simple thing, and yet they're requesting an entire refund. And so I think just being open to having conversations, obviously seeking legal counsel if needed, and not taking things so personally. That's one of the things that I see happen a lot.
Yes.
And I've experienced this too, right? You pour a lot into your work, into your content, into your clients. And, when that happens, or if that happens, it can be kind of unsettling. And so I just think it's good to prepare ahead of time. And kind of one of the themes here in this conversation is just kind of expect all of it. Honestly, expect that all of these things that we're talking about is going to be a part of it. It's part of business. It's part of scaling a business. And honestly, having these problems are normal when the business is growing. And so, I just think that that's wonderful advice, no matter what stage somebody is at right now.
And I love what you said. You think maybe you have 1% unhappy customers or 0.5%, which is tiny.
Yeah.
But after you have 100 customers or 200 customers, like there are going to be one or two here or there.
Yeah.
So it really is not an if, it's a when. And like you said,
Totally.
it's very easy to take it very personally because it is your work and it can feel like a judgment on yourself. And so that is where your great work with thought work and trying to get some distance from the drama can be really helpful.
Yeah. And I also think that that's where your side of it too, right? Like having those legal things in place and being very clear about that it also helps to eliminate so much of that in the process of if or when that comes up. So that's great. Good. Okay. So we've talked about a lot here. What other things do you think are important for coaches to consider as the industry, obviously the industry in general has grown exponentially in the past few years. And I don't know what the latest numbers are, but, obviously we're going to continue to grow and expand. What do you think are some of the most important things that any coach should really be thinking about right now?
Yeah. So we talked about trademarks a little bit. We talked about registering them, protecting them. What we didn't talk about is, and this is, like you said, for any coach, if you are thinking of a new brand, a new program name, a new tagline, is making sure that someone else is not already using it. Okay. So this is a way to avoid problems down the road, is to just run a quick, you can do this yourself. You don't, we do this for our clients, but you don't have to have a lawyer to do just what I call like a quick and dirty trademark search. So do a Google, go on podcast platforms, any social media platforms that you use, and just search it up, as my kids would say, and see what pops up. And if you find that a lot of other people are using either that same thing or something really similar, doesn't mean you can't use it, but it probably means it's a crowded field. So that is going to be hard to protect. So as you're thinking like you might want to grow that brand or use that more widely, it's going to be a weak trademark. It's going to be hard to protect later.
That's good.
So it's kind of the more creative you can be, the more you can avoid stepping on other people's toes. That is going to set you up for success down the road so that, when you are at that point where it makes sense to register it, you're in good shape to do so. You always want to be the first to use anything in your business. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely think there are certain segments, certain audiences, certain niches that are, like you said, just more crowded and a little bit more, I don't like to use the word really saturated because I don't believe that, but they are more crowded. And I have seen examples of that where, very common words even are, somebody may have trademarked that or, have some protections, legal protections around that. And I have seen scenarios, I haven't personally experienced that, but I've seen scenarios where that has come up and that can be a challenge. So I think that that's really good to think about it. How can I be unique to do these searches, but also like really, as I'm building my brand, think about how can I really position myself in the most unique way that I can, I think is good.
If you're using generic words or descriptive words, you're just going to run into other people using similar words because it's kind of obvious. So
yeah, that's so good. Well, wonderful. Well, Autumn, thank you so much for today's conversation. This was so valuable and so much great wisdom here. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we sign off? I definitely want to let everybody know where they can find you, where they can reach out and get some more support if needed. But is there anything else that you'd like to share?
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention, we talked about contracts a little bit. And in addition to working one-on-one with clients like we do with your company, Amanda, we do sell contract templates, which are a great, affordable kind of entry-level way to start getting some legal protections around your business without spending thousands of dollars. So I am a huge fan of templates. I think they are useful no matter where you are. We have some 7-figure clients who still will grab a template if they just need something quick. That is an incredible resource that I want to make sure your audience is aware of.
And thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to mention that I highly recommend, if you don't have contracts, especially, or if you are in need of them or need to refresh and want to take a look at that, I highly recommend, Autumn and her team and the contracts that they have. I think they're well experienced in this online coaching business industry, which I value so much. So would highly recommend. Where can people find you? So if they want to find those contracts, if they want to, get more resources from you and your team, where can they find you?
Yeah. So our website is just my initials, awbfirm.com. And then we're AWB Firm on all of the platforms. We tend to be most active on Instagram and Facebook, but we'd love to interact with anybody. I love to be in the DMs, answering questions and chatting. So feel free to reach out either of those places.
So good. Thank you so much, Autumn, for your time today. So it's great.
Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome.
Hey, if you're ready for a real breakthrough in your business and want to grow and scale your business to at least 6 figures or more in annual revenue, I invite you to apply for my exclusive program, The Mastermind, at amandakarlstadcoaching.com/the-mastermind. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Life Coach Business Podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build, grow, and scale your business and accelerate your results, visit amandakarlstadcoaching.com.